Move on to number 10, report of the city manager, budget update.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I've been promising the council more in-depth evaluation of what's happening with the budget at this time of year, and so here we are, the new year, 2014, and I hope it's going to be a good one. Jeremy Craig is going to help me flip the slide, so go to the next one. There we go. It's that time of year where we are gearing up for fiscal year 14-15. If you can believe it or not, July will be here before you know it, and so we're going through the process of putting together the base documents that culminate in a budget that gets disseminated to the council in May of every year. And our plan, at least so far, unless I get different input from the council, so I'm kind of asking you this question, is to continue the past practice of holding 2 study sessions and a public hearing on the the budget. And so if you have input for process that might be different than what we've been doing for the last few years, certainly give me that feedback now, because we need to build that into the timeline, and right now is when we're developing that timeline. So please give me that feedback as soon as possible. And then as we develop the budget document, all of our budgets look at how we forecast our revenues to determine how much money we can spend. We look at short-term forecasting tools as well as long-term tools. Obviously, long-term forecasting gets very fuzzy, so we do the best we can in trending information. And so the next slide. We do make adjustments in the budget every year to address numbers that we know are going to be static, and really only have 1 or 2 years of data that we can count on. The first is our healthcare costs. We get the healthcare adjustment for the calendar year every October, so we can plan ahead a little bit there. Pension rates are set about 2 years in advance, so we plug those numbers in. And then other related costs that we know, certain contracts with the county for certain services, we plan ahead on. And then where we don't know what's happening, we try to trend that cost based on past increases in costs or fixed costs that we know will stay the same. And so we try to be really as accurate as we can be, but there's always going to be some adjustments that we make to our forecasting document throughout the year based on things that happen. Now, the other part of the budget that's always a bit of a work of art, and the council's gotten more involved in this process than in the past, because revenue adjustments or allocations and forecasts are based on us making projections, and so we have to do a little bit of guesswork and figure out how that's going to work. And sometimes those forecasts are accurate, sometimes they're not, and so we've been fairly conservative in projecting revenue, and based on that modest adjustment moving forward, it's proven to be healthy for us. And while our sales tax has still been performing and doing well, third quarter of 2013, which was July through October of this year, threw us a curveball, and we actually saw a year-over-year reduction in sales tax, which we did not expect. The net impact of that, we think, is about 1.3% based on certain anomalies that occur in terms of people who report and don't report, or something happened in 2012 that didn't happen in 2013. But I just wanted to report that there's still some volatile things happening with revenues, and that's important to keep note of as we look forward. Don't want to overreact to that, though. Quarter 4 is usually the biggest one of the year, and hopefully any losses that we saw in quarter 3 will be made up in the fourth quarter. We'll have to see. Property tax is improving. We had expected some adjustments upward based on announcements from our tax assessor last year. And while we didn't see those in our December payment, we're doing more research, and permanent damage was done to property tax, one of our major revenue sources due to short sales and foreclosures. Whenever a sale of a home occurs, that readjusts the Prop 13 base value that then can only increase by so much every year. So that has been a problem that will continue to occur over a long time. So next slide. So how we look forward and how the city's budget is going to be measured is how well will our forecast or our revenues and expenditures track together. And so you see this funny looking blue line. It kind of looks like the back of a camel in a way. The head is on the left and the hump is on the right. You can see there the big dip in our reserve. It went to just below 5% in fiscal year 20, actually right about mid-2012. That was a really scary time for the city, and so we reached out to our community and placed measures on the ballot to help bolster the city's funding sources. And as you can see, in 2012, that was approved by the voters, and we started to see revenue increase through two measures, the measures on the ballot and the economy just starting to improve a bit, although it's been slow. We're seeing progress. And so you can see that improvement pretty dramatic in our reserves, and we expect them, if things go as we think they may, our reserve could become quite healthy pretty quickly and peak at about 2018. But what happens in 2018? Measure M expires, and if spending continues to stay on our current projection and the cost increases that we see in certain things that we don't control come about, which we do expect, healthcare and pension costs are rising. Our revenues may not keep pace with expenditures, and there's a likelihood that if we project way far out, which is very fuzzy, that our reserve could go down again. The other key piece to the sharp increase from 2012 to 2013 on our reserve also was due to another factor which I failed to mention, and that was one-time revenues due to the dissolution of redevelopment. And so we had a healthy $7 million adjustment that came as one-time revenue. While we'll see some revenue from the dissolution of redevelopment over time in our budget, that was one big significant one-time kick, and it brought our reserve back to meet council policy pretty quickly. But if we're not diligent in containing costs, that reserve will be depleted if we don't take a closer look at the longer-term picture. Next slide. You know, as I was mentioning, not to get too far into it, because projecting out farther than 5 years is extremely fuzzy, and a lot can change. The economy can really improve, but it just points out that the expenditures for the city continue to increase. When you look at the forecast, our expenses continue to increase, even though we've made a lot of measures or taken a lot of actions to contain costs. For example, that previous slide and this slide here assume that we continue to receive concessions from our employees, which have been pretty much across the board here, and all the employees have been very helpful to the city over the last 5 years. It's been a very painful process, but if those concessions go away, it changes the picture pretty quickly. So the next slide, I'll just show you what happens. If we continue to receive Measure I and Measure M revenue, that's plugged in here, but the concessions go away and the revenue projections that we have that assume modest growth stay in place, we could still deplete the city's reserves by 2019. And the reason why it's important to point that out is that while I don't like the concession, it's been very painful for everyone, there is still a necessity for us to continue to be mindful of the need of and the benefit that those concessions have provided to the city budget. And so it pains me to say that Measure M certainly has helped us get through the really difficult time that we've been going through, but it may not be the cure to the city's problem. So next slide. We continue to outpace our expenditures. It goes from right now, our structural deficit, not including Measure M revenue, is $1.5 million, meaning our current budget, if we did not have Measure M, we are spending $1.5 million more than what we receive in revenue. And if you move forward, that goes up to $10.3 million in 18-19. So just want to not well, maybe it is a wet blanket. I guess it's hard to say. We're very happy about the improvements to the economy, but we need to see a lot more improvement, and we need to ensure that we are mindful of improving our economy. That's why we brought those economic development incentives to you tonight. We see those playing a bigger role in attracting jobs and business here. And as you saw with the ICON project in fall, there are a lot of spin-off effects of high-wage jobs that can really help to bring in not directly tangible, but tangible dollars into the city's funds. So we're going to continue to be diligent in attracting new jobs to Vacaville and bringing in new funding. We're going to have to continue to be aggressive in that regard. The next slide. So going forward, we're going to continue to carefully track revenue and performance. And like I just mentioned, aggressively pursue revenue enhancements as much as possible. Continue to contain costs and carefully evaluate expenditures. Be mindful of long-term trends and continue to plan for the future. And, while it may be a little bit difficult pill to swallow to see that there's still some volatility out there in the city's budget, I think it's important that we remain upbeat and positive and have a good attitude about economic improvement. Good attitude brings good things and moving forward. We have a fabulous team with our employees, and they've been great partners in dealing with this horrible economic storm that we've called it. And to that end, we need to be mindful that in 2018, April of 2018, Measure M expires. And assuming that that's not going to continue, which is basically what I heard during the election process, we need to have other plans in place. So we'll keep working on it and keep very vigilant in trying to maintain the city's budget.